But all of us act like the Israelites. The Israelites are not just a people in the Old Testament. We are the Israelites. We complain. We get in our own way. God doesn't show us something immediately, and it's not instant gratification. We turn to our own wicked ways to fulfill spiritual needs. We feel lonely. We find us a sneaky link. We go through, we do all these things. We create situationships. We stay in relationships that we know God isn't in for longer than we should. We hold on to jobs that God has called us out of. We stay in places that we know God has called us out of. When God calls us to something new, we're resistant. We don't want to go. We're afraid. And we're like, oh, the Israelites are crazy. No, we're the Israelites, because God is calling you to something new, and you're so resistant, you're so in your own way that the very thing that will heal you, you are choosing to stay out of because of your past trauma. That's what happens. So what the enemy does a lot of times, most of the time, is that he's going to mess with your head. You feel strongly in one direction, you got peace about it. The enemy's going to come in. Why do you think that? You know where you've been? You know what you got going on? You know what you did in the past. You know it's too big for you. You know, you crazy. That's not God. That was you. You didn't think that. That's what you wanted. That's not what God. The enemy is going to, he doesn't play fair either. He's going to use all different kinds of stuff to get you out of purpose. And I wondered about that. Why is the warfare for me has just been so hard? It's been a battlefield in my mind, me trying to fight and stay in faith. And I wondered about that. Why? And I get it now. If he gets you out of faith, if he gets you out of believing, he takes you out of promise. If the enemy can get you out of alignment with God, if he can get you out of faith, if he can have you go, two-stepping you on the line, if he can have you doing that, he can keep you right where you are. That's why he does it. You have to understand, family, when God gives you a promise, immediately you're going to go through process. It's an unrealistic expectation, and I hate, y'all, when I Google it, it really infuriates me. When people say, oh, it's going to be easy, it's going to be this, it's going to be that. Nothing in the word of God, there was no promise that God ever gave that came without process. Not one. Even Jesus had to go through process. So that's why when you feel like you're supposed to be going in a certain direction, or you feel like God has called you to a certain direction, you like, I'm going through these obstacles, I'm going through this opposition. Why? And God it's process. That's why. It's process. It's preparing you for, you're exiting one season, going into a new one, and he wants to make sure that when you enter the new one, the issues, the situations, whatever that was appearing in the old one does not show up in the new one. He's doing that on purpose. When we go into anything in our lives without process, we do not do it well. Like if I was to go into a situation right now and I didn't have process, a blessing can feel like a curse if it comes in through the wrong season, because I'm not prepared. If I was to go get Soraya a car right now because Soraya wants a car and I give her the keys, but she doesn't know how to drive, that's a curse. I'm now putting her in a position where she can really hurt herself and others because she has not learned how to drive the car and how to drive it well. I have not shown her. I have not taught her. She does not know. God doesn't give blessings without process. Period. And what we do and what happens is because our world is so instant gratification, the enemy is running amok, making it hard for people to wait on God, to go through a process. You've got kids when they're in high school, they don't want to go through the process of learning and growing and doing tests. They want to take one test and be done. They don't want to go through 4 years of this. There is process to promise. Otherwise, it doesn't stay. Think about the lottery, family. People get millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in one day. No process. There is not an accident that almost all of them file for bankruptcy within 3 years of winning the lottery. Why? Because they don't have process. That is the point. There is process to promise. There's always going to be a wilderness. It's always going to take longer than you thought it would. It always will. That is God's process. So anyway, a lack of faith can keep someone from receiving the promises of God. So when people tell you all the time, oh, nothing can get you out of the will of God. Nothing. It's not true. A lack of faith. One of the main ways. People talk about behavior. It's about faith. There's nothing. The Israelites did a lot of things. Okay, they did a lot, but what was listed was the lack of faith. Their unbelief and their rebellion against God is the reason why they did not enter into the promises. When God calls you to something, and there is a promise, there will be a process. In Numbers 14:11, it says, and God said to Moses, how long will these people treat me like dirt? How long will they refuse to trust me? And all the signs I've done among them. That's Numbers 14:11. He says, how long will they refuse to trust me? All the signs I've done among them and they still don't trust me. It angered him that if after everything he's done, they still chose to not trust him. In Numbers 14:22-23, it says, not one of the men who saw my glory, saw the miracles I did in Egypt in the wilderness, and who had tested me over and over and over again, turning a deaf ear to me, not one of them will set sight on the land I so solemnly promised their ancestors. No one who has treated me with such repeated contempt will see it. He says, I have shown you over and over again that I'm faithful. I have shown you over and over again that I'm faithful. And they continue to complain, and they continue to test me, and they continue to do these things. And then now they're choosing to doubt me again. No, they ain't going. They ain't going. After everything I've done, you still not going to trust me? They ain't going. Family, I'll get to that later. Let me go ahead. The third thing I want to show you guys was Hebrews 3:18-19. It says their lack of faith kept them from entering. And who was God provoked with for 40 years? Wasn't it those who turned a deaf ear and ended up as corpses in the wilderness? And when he swore that they would never get to where they were going, wasn't he talking to the ones who refused to trust him? They never got there because they never listened and they never believed. They never listened and they never believed. That is why they did not enter their promised land. That is why the warfare is so strong on your mind. That is why the enemy plagues us with disappointment and not wanting to step out in faith and not wanting to, when God prompts us to do something, we don't do it. And it's because of this fear that grips us and paralyzes us. And the enemy's just done a really good job of making us afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of stepping out in faith, afraid. And that is the very thing that keeps us out of the promises of God. That is why it is the way it is. That is why all we are taught is fear, because it's like, well, that's impossible for us. Look at what the world is today. That's impossible for me. How can it happen? How can it happen? How can it happen? I can't see it. We are taught the literal opposite way of being able to really walk in the promises of God. That's why. So when you're so analytical and you're so logical and you need to see it. You need to see it to believe it. You're just logically processing through all these different things and you're not speaking the language of faith fluently. That is why your wilderness is longer. because God is trying to prepare you and you keep swimming against the current. Hebrews 11:6 says this, it's impossible. It is impossible. It is impossible. It is impossible to please God apart from faith. It is impossible to please God apart from faith. And why? Because anyone who wants to approach God must believe both that he exists and that he cares enough to respond to those who seek him. You have to believe not only that he exists, but that he cares enough to respond to those who seek him. I didn't realize this, family. I didn't understand why the attacks, as I'm believing God and trusting God for more, why the attacks on my mind were so intense. And God, the enemy doesn't attack everything that comes into your mind. He's going to attack the things that God has put on your spirit to do. He's going to attack it because that is how he gets you out of alignment. That is how he does it. He gets you out of alignment by causing you to doubt and to get out of faith. That's why. That's why when you start trusting and moving in faith and really getting into it, there's going to be an opposing force. And if we're not guarded, if we're not prepared, we think it's God saying no or God isn't with us. No, when they led them out of Egypt, they had a promise. He led them out of Egypt, but they went through a wilderness. And a lot of us, none of us like the wilderness. No one likes it. But the point of the wilderness was a dependence on God, is where their faith was tested and God showed himself true. God showed himself true. He showed up every single time. Even after they didn't enter the promised land, he still fed them every day for 40 years. He was still faithful, even when they weren't.